welcome to this explorative lecture, Walking, Sitting and Wellbeing, the Connections. My name is Marion McAllister and I am part of the Strategic Partnerships team involved in organising this event. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge that this land we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge that the Kaurna people are the custodians of the Kaurna land and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important to the living Kaurna people today. The Strategic Partnerships team would also like to thank Gabrielle Kelly and her team, especially Dunya, for partnering with us on this event and hosting the lecture today. We've had such a great response and we know this is the result of the success of the SAHMRI public lectures and the profile of the Wellbeing and Resilience Centre. Before we begin, there are quite a few little housekeeping tasks that I'd like to go through. If you haven't found them already, the toilets are out the back doors, ladies to the left, gentlemen to the right. Twittering. If you're a Twitterer, it's hard to say, isn't it? If you are Twittering, you are welcome to use the hashtag today, which is Walking for Wellbeing, and to Twitter throughout the event, and please feel free to join in. Also, we are filming the session today and hope that this will go up on the website. So there's also some photos being taken. So if you do not want your photo or yourself to be in any of the filming or the photos, which will of course be centred on the speakers, please let Julia know. She's around the place at the back. Thanks, Julia. And also, if you can't see very well because now the cameraman is in your way, please get up and move so that he can see easily. Also, while we are Twittering today, your phone, and you can use your phone for that, we don't want them making any of their phone noises, so please turn them to silent. Also, it would be very useful for us as the organisers and the speakers today to have a little bit of an idea about where you might have come from or what your interest is in today's lecture. So, firstly I'd like you to put your hand up if you came today because you are a teacher or involved in our education or primary high school education system, kindergarten system in some way. Thank you. Excellent. Hands down. I want you to put your hand up if you work in local government. Excellent. Few of you. Good. I want you to put your hand up if you are involved in sport and recreation from a public or private perspective. A few. Good. If you are a health worker or involved in health prevention or promotion initiatives. Fantastic. It's great to see so many of you. Thought we were a dying race. Okay. If you're involved in research or a part of the university or higher education system, either as a student or a worker. Great. And if your work involves creating supportive environments for improved health and wellbeing, especially physical activity. And last but not least, of course, if you've come for your own personal interest today. Great. Also, before we start, it's always nice to know the person next to you, so if you could just take a minute, it's going to go into time, but just to say hello to the person next to you, unless you're sitting all by yourself. so hopefully you'll be able to share your voices again then. When I googled connections between physical activity, sitting, health and mental wellbeing, I got a raft of highly relevant and credible documents, including at the top of the list, the new Australian Physical Activity and Sedentary Behaviour Guidelines. Now this might reflect the insidious nature of Google, or the fact that government guidelines have caught up with the evidence. This version of the guidelines contains the concept of sitting and sedentary behaviour and the benefits of being physically active include socialising and prevention and management of mental health and prevention and overall improving our wellbeing. So the information is all there in very engaging colour, I'm sure you agree. Surely we're all moving and reaping the benefits for our minds and our bodies because the guidelines are now so clear and they're all up to date. That's what's happening, isn't it? We're all moving more, reaping the benefits. As a dietitian, I know that knowledge is not enough. And as a public health and obesity prevention professional, I know that the environment and cultural context we live in plays a huge part in the capacity of the community to make the best choices for optimal health. So what will make a difference? Perhaps that's why you're here today. I know I'm here to understand the evidence more, to know what strategies might help us to be more active and find out what's happening here in South Australia to improve the health, mental health and overall wellbeing of everyday South Australians. Before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge that, as you're all aware, unfortunately our program today has needed to change. We had concerning news late last week that Dr. Rodney Tolley needed to return to the United States for medical reasons and would be unable to present. This was very sad news, very sad for Rodney, his partner, and we hope that he will receive the very best of US healthcare and be on the improve soon. Although he's not here, our lineup of presentations has not altered a great deal. After our first speaker, we will be hearing as planned from Fraser Keegan, then from Gabrielle Kelly, and our final speaker before the panel session will be Wendy Keach, who has stepped in at late notice to fuel our program and present on Walking SA. Before Rodney became unwell, he had prepared for this session, and we have been very fortunate that Professor Tim Olds was willing to extend and incorporate aspects of Rodney's information into his presentation today. Tim is Professor of Behavioural Epidemiology in the School of Health Sciences at the University of South Australia. With PhDs in French and exercise science, Tim has 210 publications and over 23 million in research funding. He was the project director of the Australian National Children's Nutrition and Physical Activity Survey and of the Australian Defence Force Adapt Agriculture Project. He is author of the Multimedia Activity Recall for Children and Adults, the Marker, and the Life-Size Body Measurement Software. In the past, he has developed mathematical models of cycling performance, co-authored the textbook Anthropometrica, and studied historical changes in the fitness, fatness, physical activity, sleep, and food intake of children around the world. He was Deputy Chair of the South Australian Health's Opal Scientific Advisory Committee. His recent work looks at how people use their time and how time use impacts on health. He is a regular columnist for Australasian Scientist and has contributed to News.com, New Philosopher and The Conversation. Tim will present today on the evidence and background on physical activity, sitting and links to health and wellbeing, including mental health. This will include an outline of the rapidly emerging evidence on the impact of sitting. He will outline some of the recent controversies around sitting, including whether sitting really matters for people who are physically active. Personally, that's a big one that I want to know about. And whether public policy should focus on physical activity or sitting. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks very much, Marion. I'd like to thank SA Health and SAHMRI for the opportunity to present here today. It's always a great pleasure. By the time I've finished talking to you, which will be about 35 minutes because I can keep the time, by the time I finish talking to you, I will shorten your lives by about 12 minutes. A recent Australian study found that for every hour you spend sitting, you shorten your life by 22 minutes. So it'll rob you of 12 minutes by the time you're finished here. You may not worry about that now, but on your deathbed you'll be cursing. You'll say, bloody old, they could have taken a bit of time saying my farewells. The good news, however, is that for every hour we spend exercising, we increase our lives by 1.5 hours. So you just need to have an 8-minute walk following this talk, and we'll be back to square one after that. There's a well-known relationship, a strong relationship between the way we spend our time, and particularly how we spread out our time across different energy zones, from sleep right through to the most vigorous type of physical activity, and an incredible range of health outcomes. Physical activity in particular has been shown to both prevent and to mitigate an extraordinarily wide range of diseases, everything from diabetes to depression, from cancer to constipation has been improved by exercise. In fact, the American College of Sports Medicine in 2012 launched a program called Exercise is Medicine, and Bob Salas, who's the spokesperson, said this about it. Said, if we had a pill that conferred the proven benefits of walking, doctors would prescribe it to every patient. Healthcare systems would find a way to make sure every patient had access to this wonder drug. And it's true. Exercise, physical activity is more powerful than any drug. It's probably more powerful than every drug put together. This is a summary of studies which have had a look at the relationship between how much physical activity we do, that's on the x-axis here, this is in hours per week, and the risk of all-cause mortality, the risk of dying. We all die eventually. This is the risk of dying at any particular age. Although these studies have used different methodologies and different populations, you can see the general pattern is very clear. That when we just go from zero to physical activity, just a little bit, just 4 hours a week, just half an hour, a bit more than half an hour a day, we reduce our risk of dying quite dramatically by about 20%. The more we do, the better it is. It's a case of diminishing returns. So you don't get the same benefit going from 4 to 8 hours as you do going from 0 to 4 hours. Even a little bit of physical activity, even 20 minutes a day, dramatically reduces your risk of dying from all causes. And it's so powerful, in fact, it's much more powerful than body weight. It's better to be fit and fat than to be lean and unfit. This is a study conducted by Stephen Blair, American researcher. It's based on data from Kenneth Cooper's clinic in Dallas. And they followed a group of men, about 10,000, 25,000 men, I think, for about 15 years. And they had a look at their level of physical activity, level of fitness, fit or unfit, and their weight category, normal weight, overweight or obese. And they had a look at the risk of them dying. And this is the pattern that you get. So the red bars are for the people that are fit. The yellow bars are people who are unfit, and we're moving across the weight categories here. So you can see no matter how much you weigh, your risk of death barely increases providing you're fit. So Stephen Blair has a BMI of 30, who claims he holds the world record for the marathon adjusted for BMI, is a strong advocate of this line of thought. But there's a really strong argument for it, that it's better to be fit and fat than to be unfit and lean. So fitness, physical activity, which is a proxy, but physical activity is more powerful than fatness. Not all forms of physical activity are equally efficacious. Any physical activity you do is good for you, but there are some forms that are better than others. It appears to relate to intensity. The more intensity exercise, the greater the benefits. So this study was a meta-analysis compared active transport, which is walking, moderate physical activity, which would be a light jog or a light cycle, moderate to vigorous physical activity, which is the whole range from light to quite heavy, and sport and exercise. And this shows how your risk of dying decreases with these 4 different types of exercise. It seems the critical thing is energy turnover. The greater energy turnover, the greater the benefit you get out of physical activity. And of course, it's not only the risk of dying, it's the risk of a whole range of diseases. I can't go through them all. We know that physical activity reduces your risk of getting and suffering from cardiovascular disease and diabetes and the metabolic syndrome. But it also affects depression. So this is a study done by an Australian, SAHMRI. He followed up 40,000 Norwegians and had a look at the effect of their reported leisure physical activity and other types of physical activity on the prevalence of depression. This is the pattern you get. But when you go from no physical activity to less than 1 hour, that's only 30 minutes a week, then the risk of the prevalence of depression is halved. Your risk of depression is halved. You find the same thing for vigorous physical activity, intense leisure time physical activity. Once again, just a little bit will dramatically reduce your risk of depression. Interestingly, we don't find the same thing for occupational physical activity. It actually goes up if you do too much work. I'll come back to that later on. Because one of the interesting questions here is why? Why is physical activity so powerful? Why has it got all these extraordinary effects? What's the connection? I'll talk a little bit about the mechanisms as we go on. I just skip this one so no time short. It's not only physical activity, it's also sitting. You've probably seen ads like this that show that sitting will kill you, and I've indicated already that I'll be killing you slowly. Death on the instalment plan for you guys today. But here are a couple of studies which had a look at the effect of sitting. This one had a look at the joint effect of physical activity and sitting on the risk of dying. So women are indicated in yellow and men in red here. And they divided these people into 5 categories according to how much physical activity they get. This group gets the least physical activity, this group gets the most. And within each of these categories, they had a look at how much time they reported spending sitting, from less than 3 hours to more than 6 hours. And this is the pattern we get. I'll just show you first for the least active category. You can see the risk of dying increases dramatically, particularly for women, as they sit less. So we find the same pattern at every level of physical activity. No matter how physically active you are, you get a benefit from sitting less. But that benefit diminishes. You see the lines get flatter? So if you look at just the male line here, we really get a huge benefit from not sitting if we are very inactive. If we're more active, the benefit we get from not sitting is diminished. And that's something else I'll return to later on. The people who are very physically active, they really need to be worried about not sitting enough. We'll come back to that one. If you just look at the death rate from television, television is probably the greatest killer. One of the questions which I will come to later is it all kinds of sitting, or are there particular types of sitting which are particularly dangerous? And it looks like television may be the real killer. This just shows the crude death rate per 10,000 people across bands of television time. So you can see there's a curvilinear increase, death from all causes, death from cardiovascular disease, death from cancer. They all increase particularly dramatically at the upper ends when you get 4, 5 or 6 hours of television viewing each day. So there's a wide body of evidence showing that more physical activity and less sitting is good to you in almost any respect. Sitting also has been associated with psychological well-being as well. This study had a look at children, and it just had a look at a measure of psychological distress. We used the Strength and Difficulties questionnaire. And had a look, ask the question, is there a relationship between how much screen time, that is television, video games, computer time, kids get, and their level of psychological distress? The answer is yes. So as the hours of screen time increase, the psychological distress increases, and that trend is statistically very significant. When they get more than 3 hours a day, they have much higher levels of psychological distress. I could go on, but I won't, because the evidence is so strong that physical activity is good for us. In fact, I've now been in this business, so I guess we've got almost 25 years now, and it's both sort of frightening and heartening that I can sum up everything I know in these 4 words: sit less, move more. That's about it. But if you have a look across populations, if you know who sits and who moves, what happens as people get older? They sit more, they sit less. What happens what difference between men and women, for example? Well, this is data based on our studies. We've collected use of time data on 5,000 adults, Australian adults. I just want to show you how the pattern of sitting changes with age. I'm going to show you the average amount of time spent sitting in different domains for 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40, 50, 60 and 70-year-olds. First I'm going to show you leisure time physical activity. So watching TV, eating, reading, lying awake in bed and phone. They all follow a similar sort of pattern. They actually go down, they bottom out around the 40s and 50s. And this is because of children. basically, that these people have children, they've got chores to do, they're building houses, they're working and so forth, and that's why it diminishes there. If we look at work physical activity, work sitting rather, we find exactly the opposite. That work sitting peaks around your 40s and 50s. So for computers, for sitting and talking at meetings, and for active transport, for transport in general, so driving around for work meetings and so forth, that peaks in 40s. When you add it up, it doesn't actually change much across the life course. So young people, young adults, see just about as much as older adults as well. It's not until they get really considerably older that you get, in their 70s and 80s, that you get really substantial increases in sitting. Let's go have a look at who moves now, who's physically active. And I want to compare men and women here in these three domains: light physical activity, which is mainly household chores and pottering about the house; moderate physical activity, which would be like brisk walking; vigorous physical activity, which is sports and so forth. The men are indicated by red and the women in yellow. This is the pattern that we get. So if we look just light physical activity, these top two lines here, we see that women do much more light physical activity than men. This is mainly stuff they do around the house, looking after children and so forth. There's not much difference in moderate physical activity, they're about the same. But there are big differences, particularly amongst the young and vigorous physical activity. So men are more likely to play sport, go to the gym than women, so they accumulate more time there. The next screen is going to shock a lot of you, so I just want you to be a bit prepared for it. But what we did here was have a look at the different domains in which men and women use their time, the different types of activities they did. This shows the differences. Anything above the line means that men do more of it. Anything below the line means women do more of it. And the shocking finding is that women do more chores than men. Women, on average, across the lifespan, do 30 minutes more chores than men. And this is how it's made up, the different types of chores that they do. So what do men do while the women are doing the chores? Well, they sit in front of screens, basically, in front of television. They get about 30 minutes more television. They do a bit more work, a bit more physical activity, but that's the great trade-off in today's society. The women do the housework, the men sit in front of the television. Now, when Mary was introducing, she said, well, is it true that we're getting this message? Are we moving more and sitting less over time? Well, the short answer is we don't really know, because we haven't had sort of a questionnaire we've asked people for the last 50 years, but I want to show you a few snapshots, some really interesting snapshots, which give us an idea of what's happening to people over time. This first one is this absolute gem. I found a paper from 1922. It was written by a young woman called Virginia Bedale, and she was the first woman to get a PhD from Cambridge University. And as part of the PhD, she went to a rural school in England, and was called, just purely by chance, Bedale School. It's just a bit of serendipitous eponymous name there. And she measured with methods which are still gold standard today, even 100 years later. She measured the amount of physical activity and the amount of sitting that kids did in that school. And we can compare them to kids today from the National Australian Survey. I should mention, by the way, Bedale School is quite well known. So some of the alumni of Bedale School are Daniel Day-Lewis, the actor, and John Wyndham, the science fiction author, and Lily Allen, the British singer. She was a particularly famous alumna. She was actually expelled from Bedale School for something. This shows how much time boys and girls in 1922 spent sitting each day compared to kids age-matched kids in 2007. So see, in 1922, the average boy spent a little over 300 minutes. Now it's almost twice that for boys today. They spend sitting. And in 1922, the differences in girls are a little bit less, about 350 minutes through to almost 600 minutes. This just shows the percentile. So what we're saying is that if a boy today sat for only 300 minutes, he would be in the bottom 1% of sitters. If a girl today sat for only 350, 400 minutes, she would be even below the bottom 1%. So in those days, they sat much less than we do today. We've got other evidence too. This is evidence from driving. So remember, a lot of time we're spending driving. And this shows trends in the amount of kilometres driven. This is in thousands of kilometres per head per year in different cities around the world. And the percentage of trips which have been walked or cycled. It just shows the patterns in these different cities over those 30-year period from 1960 through to 1990. And here's the pattern. We have what personally the best city in the world, Amsterdam. This is in 1960. About 60% of all trips were walked or cycled, and they drove only a couple of hundred kilometres each day. By the time we got to 1990, only 30% of trips were walked or cycled, and up to about 2,000 kilometres a day. When we get the worst city, which is Houston, Brisbane, by the way, is one of the only cities in the world where there are actually more cars than people. There are 1.1 cars per person in Brisbane. One wonders what one does with all those cars. And we find the same sort of pattern. So it's very clear we're spending more time in our cars and less time walking. So that's another thing which suggests that we're moving towards a more sedentary society. This is a very interesting study. It's done by Tim Church at Baton Rouge. I don't know if anyone here been to Baton Rouge in Louisiana? It's amazing. There are no footpaths. It's an amazing city. It's probably the worst designed city I've ever seen in my life. We were staying in a hotel. I was staying with my postdoc, Cara Ma, and she'd never been to the station. She wanted to visit Walmart. And there was a Walmart literally 50 metres across the road, and we had to catch a taxi to get there. It was impossible to walk there. There was just non-stop cars. There were no sidewalks. It was quite amazing. Now, this study done by Tim at Baton Rouge just had a look at trends in the energy expenditure of people at work in the United States from 1960 through to 2010. So we had a look at the kind of jobs they did. We've got a fair estimate of how much energy they used. And this is the pattern that we get. There's been a steady decline in the amount of energy people use at work because they're sitting more at work. They're not moving about, they're not labouring, they're not lifting things, they're sitting in front of computers. And this equates for both men and women to a drop of about 100 kilocalories per day. And this drop alone would be enough to explain the increase in obesity in the United States since 1960. If we did nothing else, just the change in energy expenditure at work, the more sitting they do at work, would explain the increase in energy, increase in obesity if they maintain the same food intake. And there's actually evidence that they did. And the final snapshot we have is an interesting one. This has to look at 14 to 17-year-olds in the United States from 1900 through to 2000 over the course of the 20th century. And have a look at how many hours per week they spent at school and how many at work. So the red line here is the school plus work hours, and the yellow line is the school hours. And you'll see that right across the century they spent about 25 hours a week total in school and work. But you can see that back in 1900, only about 7 of those hours were school, and about 18 hours of work. By the time we get now, it's about 20 hours school and only a few hours work. It's not surprising because kids leave school later. It was only in 1963 that the school age in Italy was raised the school leaving age in Italy was raised from 13 to 14. Before that, the average 13-year-old in Italy would go up, be working, doing a man's or a woman's job, working in factories or the best employer on the farm. So they're using much more energy. So school, I'm afraid, is one of the, I'm sorry about the educational people here, is one of the major contributors to sitting. And I know that schools are using very innovative programs, things like active curriculum, active lesson breaks, to reduce the amount of sitting that's done at school. School, of course, has other benefits, I should say. And just to tell you that screen time never leaves us, this is one of my favourites, this is the iPotty, so that your child may never be separated from his or her iPad here. So screen time's invading the most intimate parts of our lives. What I like about the iPod is it rewards success. So it beeps and a big number 1 or a number 2 appears on the screen. So you think I'm serious? The guidelines about screen time, by the way, I know Marion said these guidelines have been published and it's great to have them, and I actually think the guidelines about screen time are rubbish. The recommendations for young kids are that under the age of 2 they should get no screen time at all, 0 hours, and from 2 to 5 they should get only 1 hour a day. Well, I think this is just completely unrealistic. I mean, I think every parent has used TV and videos as a babysitter. And had it not been for Thomas the Tank Engine videos, I would have gone 5 years without ever having sex. And even now, when I see the Fat Controller, aptly named, when I see the Fat Controller, I feel it stirring in my groin as a result of that. I think these guidelines are unrealistic and outdated at the moment. Let me pass quickly to some controversies about sitting and physical activity, because sitting is a relatively new area. It's really only the last 10 years that we've started to talk about these things. But let's have a look at some of the hot topic issues. The first question which I asked was, if you do a lot of physical activity, does it really matter? You really have to worry about sitting. So if you're a very active person, does it really matter? And as we try to explain this graph, it's not an easy graph, it's a sort of three-dimensional graph. It has to look at the risk of cardiovascular disease. This is based on a big American study we reanalysed with the New Zealand group. It's the risk of cardiovascular disease. So the higher the point, the greater the risk of cardiovascular disease. So people down here have a low risk of cardiovascular disease. people up here have a high risk of cardiovascular disease. It shows the risk in relation to two things. Firstly, the amount of physical activity they get. So these people back here get a small amount of physical activity. These people get a large amount of physical activity. So it's not surprising as we come closer to the front here, the risk of cardiovascular disease decreases. Increases the pattern we saw, remember? A little bit of physical activity, a really rapid fall. We find that. If you go across this way, we find the effect of increased sedentary time, increased sitting time. This is the percentage of the day they actually sit. And once again, it's not surprising to find that those who sit a large amount of the time, 60, 70, 80%, they have a high cardiovascular risk, and as we come across those who don't sit much, they have a low cardiovascular risk. But the point I want to make is, look at how steep that is there. This is for the people who are physically inactive, have almost no physical activity. Reducing sitting in those people has a really big effect. It reduces cardiovascular risk dramatically. Once we get down to here, at the bottom, these are people who are very physically active, it has very little effect indeed. So I think the way it's emerging is that, sure, it's true that no matter what your level of physical activity, you get some benefit from reducing sitting. But for people who are very physically active, the benefit from reducing sitting is fairly moderate. You don't need to worry too much about it if you're very physically active. Another interesting question is, well, look, I can increase my physical activity, or I can reduce my sitting, but what's the best for me to do? What's the minute-by-minute trade-off from the two? So, to get the benefit of 10 minutes of extra physical activity, how much do I have to reduce my sitting by? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 30 minutes? Is it a day? What is it? And we just begin to ask these questions. We've got a few studies. One is a study we've been involved in, and had a look first at the risk of childhood obesity. So, if I want to reduce or limit childhood obesity, I can either get kids to get an extra 10 minutes of physical activity, or I can get them to sit for almost 6 hours less each day. All-cause mortality for adults, it's about 2 hours a day, and for cardiovascular risk, the one I've just shown you, it's about 90 minutes a day. So the bottom line is that if you've only got a small amount of time to spare, be physically active. You get much more bang for your buck for any given minute of physical activity. It seems an awful lot to have to reduce your sitting, but remember you get much better benefits if you're very inactive. As I said, so for people with conditions such as stroke or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, it makes a lot of sense to reduce sitting as well as to target physical activity. I foreshadowed the question of, well, is it all kinds of sitting, or is it just particular types of sitting which are particularly dangerous for us? And this screen shows just the research that just appeared just a few weeks ago, and had a look at the risks imposed by 3 different types of sitting. And this is the risk for every 2 hours of sitting in these different types. Television, driving, and computer. We chose these because we know these are some of the major sources of sitting. And this is the result that we get. That your risk is much greater by spending your 2 hours watching television. Your risk of dying is 40% greater and significantly different if you watch television. It's about 14% greater if you spend those 2 hours driving. And it makes almost no difference, actually time really less if you sit in front of a computer. So the bottom line is that not all forms of sitting are equivalent. Television in particular appears to be a killer. We're not sure why, but it may have to do with eating, with mindless eating. So it's very easy when you're watching television to take up just enough of your attention so that you don't notice you've just knocked off the 4th pack of Maltesers. And also the fact, of course, you're exposed to food ads all the time. So it may have to do with those factors. I should, by the way, mention all the researchers managed to. These studies are corrected for all the usual suspects, socioeconomic status and education of the parents and so forth. So although we can never know that we don't have some residual confounders, we're pretty confident that the appropriate statistical controls have been introduced. This is another issue which this is some work from my postdoctoral fellow, Carol Marr. And she said, look, if you take out sleep, we don't do a lot of moderate vigorous physical activity. The average person spends, maybe 30 minutes a day doing vigorous physical activity. If you take out sleep, all that's left is sitting and light physical activity. You're either sitting down or sort of pottering around the house, basically, or pottering around the office. So all these studies which show that sitting is bad for you, isn't that just another way of saying that light physical activity is good for you? Maybe it's got nothing to do with sitting, maybe it's got to do with the light physical activity we're doing. And Carol attempted to adjust to this using a big, very big American data set. And I'm just going to show the results here on the relationship between those who sit least and those who sit most, the effect on waist circumference. So the people who sit most fatter, and the effect on insulin levels. So it's important because persistently high insulin levels will lead to diabetes. And this is the pattern. Firstly, the red data show that when it hasn't been adjusted for total physical activity, and the yellow dots when it has been adjusted for total physical activity. So you see here, if we just focus on the red dots, when we don't adjust the total amount of physical activity we get a very strong relationship. So the more sitting you do, the bigger your waist circumference. When we take into account the fact that if they're not sitting, they've got to be doing some light physical activity, there's almost no relationship at all. And similarly with insulin, we find a similar sort of pattern that the rapid increases in insulin we find when we don't adjust are flattened out when we do adjust. So I'm inclined to think personally, though this is a hot topic at the moment in the research community, I'm inclined to think personally that it's not so much sitting on your ass, it's not so much the posture, it's the fact that you just got a very low energy turnover when you're sitting. Now that doesn't change the message, by the way. It doesn't change that you should stand more because you use more energy when you're standing. It doesn't change the message at all. It's a purely mechanistic thing which is of interest to nerdy researchers like myself. So, the big question is this is a question that interests me. Why is it so? Why is physical activity such an incredibly powerful drug? Why is it that sitting or minimising your life physical activity, why is it that appears to be so negative for us? I want to just lay out a theory which is gaining currency. It's a relatively recent theory. It was first proposed in the mid-90s, and more and more evidence is growing for it. It's called the allostatic load model. Let's explain how this theory works. It says as we go through life, we encounter a number of stresses. And these stresses can be physical stresses, so we're exposed to pathogens like toxins and viruses and bacteria. We get illness, we get cuts and so forth, we get aches and pains. And they can be psychosocial stresses. So there's things like divorce and relationship problems and money problems and school problems. There's actually a scale. It's called the Holmes-Rahe scale. I think I can remember. And it actually gives you a rating for all those life events, like 100 points of death of the spouse and so forth. Well, one thing that always interests me about the Holmes-Rahe scale is they've got a scale for adolescents, and it shows that actually failing a grade gets you 60 stress points. But being expelled from school and you get your 53 stress points. So if you've got an adolescent, just go the whole log. It'll be less stressful for you. So we've got all these stresses, and what's our response to stress? Well, it's essentially an inflammatory response. You normally think of inflammatory responses when you get an infection or a cut or something like that, but it really describes a more generalised stress response. It results in the release of hormones, cortisol, epinephrine or adrenaline, and anti-clotting agents such as fibrinogen, and all these things are emergency responses to an emergency situation. So your blood pressure, adrenaline or adrenaline pressure, blood pressure, that means that blood which is pooling in your veins is brought back into circulation, ready to carry more oxygen or energy for an emergency response. Cortisol stimulates the release of blood sugar into your bloodstream. Fats are released into your bloodstream, so you have high fat blood sugar in your bloodstream as an emergency energy supply. Fibrinogen is a clotting agent, so if you cut, there's more likely to clot. All of these things are very adaptive in the short run. They're a very sensible body response to stress. But in the long run, they're maladaptive. It's not a good idea to have high blood fats, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, and high levels of clotting agents in your body all the time. But if we have these constant stresses and we have this constant low-grade inflammation, and this inflammation is associated in ways which you don't really understand with telomere shortenings. Telomeres are the little bits at the end of the chromosomes. They've been likened in a really nice metaphor to the little plastic bits at the end of shoelaces. And when those plastic bits wear away, the shoelace starts to fray. The same happens with the chromosomes. When the telomeres get shorter and shorter, which they do with the increased stress, increased inflammation, then there are transcription errors when the genes copy each other. You get all sorts of random errors in copies. So the length of telomeres is a measure of biological age as opposed to chronological age. So these two interact. We don't know whether inflammation causes telomere shortening or vice versa, but we do know there's a strong association between stress and telomere shortening. The good news is that a lot of behaviours can affect that relationship. Physical activity, getting enough sleep, reducing sitting, good nutrition, more social interaction, all of those things will immunise us in the sense that it gets the effect of stress and inflammation and the effect of stress on telomere shortening. If we don't have immunisation, we build up allostatic load, which is just a term for things such as increased blood pressure, high blood fats, high blood glucose, the kind of things which we normally associate with metabolic and cardiovascular health problems. And that then leads to non-communicable diseases, some of them familiar, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, depression. Some are less familiar, osteoporosis, maybe inflammatory disease. I do some work with Murdoch Children's Research Institute, they actually have hearing loss and tooth decay. May also be inflammatory diseases. All these non-communicable diseases may be triggered by this stress response. And the role of physical activity in sitting is to reduce the relationship between stress and inflammation. Just a couple of examples. This is just a cross-sectional study. Looked at the relationship between your level of physical activity and your blood levels of three markers of inflammation: C-reactive protein, white blood cells, and fibrinogen. These are just things in your blood which indicate your stress response. And we find that the more physical activity a person does, the lower the levels of all these. It follows a very clear gradient. So physically active people are, in a sense, immune, not entirely immune to stress, but their stress response is much less. Just briefly, to have a relationship between telomere length and fitness. This is a measure of fitness. We find there's a very consistent relationship. The bigger you are, the longer your telomeres, that is, the lower your biological age. These people down here, the unfit people, have a low biological age, that's an older biological age. These people are younger biologically. And they just pass on because I know time is a bit short. Yeah, it's very short. So pass on to, I guess the key question is, well, what can we do? It looks like people are sitting more and moving less. What can we do to try and change this pattern? Well, I think that there are a whole lot of different initiatives. And I think we divide into sort of two general approaches. One was changing the environment. In other words, just make it too hard for you to sit there, take away your chairs, or make it impossible for you to drive your car into the school or into inner city, close off streets and walking walls. And the other targets individuals and says, look, we've really got to give individuals the resources and the confidence and the ability to walk more, to move more in this place. And you also have got context, so there's the workplace, schools and public spaces. We'll give just some solutions which have been put forward. You've probably seen these standing and treadmill desks. Here's one. No, here's one. These treadmill desks here, they become very popular at university. I've got to say, for me they don't pass the sort of ridiculous threshold. I always resist, I always feel a bit ridiculous. But they become very popular. In terms of school, the playground design, so how can design playgrounds? It's an interesting story about playgrounds. There's one thing. What's one thing you do to a playground to get kids to be active? What is the one thing you can do to a playground to get kids to be active? Anyone make a suggestion? So, you can go, there's important. But the best thing to do in terms of actually changing the environment is to put a hill in it. So if you put a hill in it, no matter what else is there, the kids are going to run up and down that hill. They tried this in the Netherlands, and they had a major program putting hills in all the playgrounds. The problem I found, the kids loved it, but the old people hated it. So the kids became more active, the old people less active. We've had a look at flexible school start times. I think it's important to allow the older kids who wake up later to have time to walk to school. Walking school buses, you're probably familiar with. In terms of public spaces, urban design, we can think about how we redesign cities to make them more walkable. Baton Rouge is a classic example of the most unwalkable city I've ever run into in my life. I didn't actually believe much in walkable, so I spent some time in Baton Rouge where it is literally impossible to walk anywhere. In terms of looking at individuals, we can have walking meetings if we place in the workplace. Instead of sitting down, want to go for a walk, we can meet. Or we can have a look at education programs for the kids. And of course, mass media programs. I'm talking about two things, just to finish. Are mass media programs effective? And a little program which one of our postdocs, Dr. Lucy Lewis, has been putting together called Small Steps. And I should show you the success we've been having there. This is the only study I can find of whether media campaigns are successful. And this shows the effectiveness of media campaigns to get the number of people who get sufficient physical activity to increase that, and to reduce the number of people with sedentary lifestyles. And basically, if the value is 1, it means it's completely ineffective. Anything above 1 means more effective.
And all these are individual studies. There are 4 individual studies. This is the sum total. And because it crosses that one line, it means they're on the whole not effective. They're only increased to there's a 2% chance, as we spoke, that they're more effective than nothing. In terms of reducing sedentary lifestyles, basically the same sort of pattern. It's slightly better, but effectively they're not particularly effective mass media campaigns. They have a small effect, but not very large effect. Treadmill desks, perhaps workplace design may be more effective. This is the study which I'll finish with, which is called the small step study. What we did here was to say to people, look, okay, it's pretty hard to change your lifestyle in a big way all at once. So what we want you to do is just to change a little bit each week. So each week we gave them a little task. We said, look, they chose their task. We said each week we're going to do something which makes you sit 5 minutes less. So you can choose what it is, and here's some suggestions. And some said, look, we'll get up during ad breaks. Or every time I get a clue done in the crossword, I'll walk around the house or something like that. And this just shows the reduction following this program. It's a 12-week program, and this is the minutes per day that they reduced their sitting by. So reduced sitting by almost an hour a day over these 12 weeks, just doing these small steps bit by bit. And here's some of the suggestions they made. They said, well, at least 1 meal each day I'll eat standing, so perhaps they stand for breakfast. They can stand up when they're not playing bowls. This is a suggestion with doing the crosswords, so they stand up other fish equivalent the crosswords. And these are other suggestions they made to all these little things, every one of which was designed to increase their standing by just 5 minutes, and it's been very effective. So they've been able, without noticing it over a period of time, to reduce their sitting by about 50 minutes. I'd just like to finish by once again thanking SA Health and SAHMRI, but also these people. This is some of the people who work with me. This is Carol Marr, whose studies I talked about. Lisa Triciani, one of the young undergraduate students who's done so much work on sleep. And the other people here have helped me with all the studies we've done. But thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Jim, for such a thought-provoking presentation. I'm sure you'll all agree. The good thing is I've worked out that I think I'm managing my life expectancy well, and I'm in the balance and creating a bit of credit for when I slow down in hopefully only 20, 30 years' time. I certainly learned some new things today about the power of not sitting, and certainly it's comforting to know that the physical activity that we can encourage people to do has such a big effect on our health and our well-being. I think the challenge for us all now is to keep our telomeres healthy and to avoid some of those non-communicable diseases with that. And indeed, the challenge for us as a society, I think, is to put some of those personal, systematic and environmental changes into place to facilitate and increase physical activity, reduce sitting, and getting that message and those actions and environments improved so that families and communities out there are indeed moving more and sitting less. So how do we get that work out into the community? How do we reach families and where the public are? We need connections with the community, and that's where our next speaker comes in. And others like him. Fraser has worked in the health, recreation and sport industries for more than 20 years and has experience delivering large-scale projects at the local, regional and state level. Moving between state-level policy and local community contexts has provided him with a keen understanding of how to successfully combine the best of top-down, bottom-up approaches to wellbeing. Most recently, as the manager of the Obesity Prevention and Lifestyle Program, OPAL, in the city of Marion, he was responsible for planning and implementing this multi-strategy, multi-setting and multi-sectorial initiative designed to increase physical activity and healthy eating. Fraser will present today, drawing on his on-the-ground experience, describing how strategic frameworks can be actioned locally when it comes to increasing walking. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you. I also just like to thank SAHMRI and SA Health for the opportunity to present today. Also like to add that I learned something about Thomas the Tank. Thank you very much for that. Now this is representing the best part of 4 years' work. I'm going to try and cram it into 15 minutes. So I'll go quickly through the slides, but as I understand the slides will be made available, and I will speak quickly. So I apologise in advance, but please interpret that as my passion and commitment to get as much information into you as I possibly can. There we go. So I'll talk a little bit about the overall approach, and as I was in my opening bio, I'll talk about what it means to take the information that Tim gives us and convert it into reality. So I'll talk a little bit about the theory and the structure of Opal, how Opal approaches walking, and I'll give you some insight into the work that we've been doing in the city over the past few years. This is the Opal logic model. It's made up of lots of different theories and constructs. When you look at it in its entirety like that, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So what I'll do is I'll just break it down quickly and put it into the context of today. So ultimately it's about increasing the health and well-being of children. We're embedded very heavily in the social marketing approach, but we understand that if we're going to bring about behaviour change, we have to have a stronger understanding of what it is that's impacting on behaviours such as walking. We know that there are environmental and individual factors, as Tim alluded to, and Opal is very much about trying to change those factors because we know there is a correlation between the environments that people live in, their individual circumstance, and the resultant behaviour. We have a strong emphasis on socio-ecology, which means that we work with the individuals, and in our case we focus on children, but we work with their families, we work with the institutions that they have the greatest contact with. We try and work at community level, which is easier said than done, ultimately to try and have societal change that we definitely need when it comes to walking and changing those city behaviours. Heavily entrenched in the community development ethos, which means that Opal doesn't do anything without the commitment and the buy-in of the community. If you don't have that, it's almost impossible to bring about the change. So we use some of these principles applied socio-ecologically, and I'll talk a bit more about that as I go on. Opal uses a multi-strategy approach in that we don't think that one thing needs to change, we think that lots of things need to change and lots of things need to happen at the same time to bring about that change. So when I think about the 7 strategies, we understand that we need to provide a programmed experience for people to experience what it is like to walk. For many kids, they don't know what it's like to walk in their local community. We have to be on top of the information. We do research and we evaluate everything we do. We're very strongly in the spirit of building connections. We think that the problems are out there, but we also think that the solutions are out there. The more people we can join up in this army, the better off we're going to be. We have to bring about policy change. We have to have strategic plans in place to make sure that the changes that we're bringing in are sustained and sustainable. The environment, as we said, is a very strong factor in the behaviours of people. Baton Rouge, if the environment changed, potentially Tim would have had a wonderful shopping experience at Walmart. We have to raise awareness about the issue, and it's not just about telling the people and the public that you need to do more. We have to change practitioner practice. We have to do it across 30, 40 sectors very, very quickly. So I'm encouraged by the diversity in the audience today, and I hope that you take some of this back to your industry and bring about the changes that we require. Obviously connected to awareness is education, that we need to bring about the skills and the knowledge to do it. Opal has a multi-project portfolio approach, and that's arguably what this diagram is trying to represent. That there's no point us just working with children or just practitioners or just parents. We have to be implementing tailor-made projects right across that scale. So that's a bit of a snapshot of what I'm going to talk about and bring to life. Just walking the talk. So if you think about this is my office, this is an average community. We all live in communities. Depending on your work hat on or your parental hat, wherever you come from, we all live in communities. So the Opal program that I was responsible for was based in the city of Marion. The first thing we did when we thought about trying to bring about walking was we contacted the Guru Rod Tolly, in partnership with the National Art Foundation, and we brought him to Marion. And we asked him, what is it that we need to do? So he took us on a walk, and the guy in the white hat, that's the CEO of the city of Marion. And so he's out there in the streets learning firsthand, this is the problem with your city, sir. If you're the CEO and you're trying to bring about wellness, you need to understand the reality of what we're trying to change. He obviously delivered workshops and he gave us a wonderful framework to think about when we're trying to bring about the change. So we use that as a blueprint for our work. Once Rod had left, we gathered staff from the city of Marion. So in that snapshot there, we have the managers of community development, environmental management, sustainability, social planners, asset managers, And that's a really strong message to people here, that you need to have that diversity of people involved, that everybody has to bring a piece to the puzzle. At the same time, we're heavily invested in working with schools. This is just an example of some of the stuff that we did. Westminster School was in our catchment area, and the first thing we did, we took the great man's work and we took it to the school and we said, look, this is the reality of what's happening. And just giving them an understanding of the issue and understanding the implications of the issue was a really good first start. So the children come up with the idea of we should get to know our community. What is it that we need to do? So we organised an opportunity for the children to walk from the school to the council and look at all the things that either helped or hindered them when they're walking through the eyes of the child. When we got there, the children met with the mayor, and we organised the chamber to operate as it would in a normal council meeting, and to show the children that they have a place and they have a position and a voice in a local democracy. Children loved it. Probably the mayor loved it more. The opportunity to have kids in there telling her what the issues were through their eyes was a very powerful moment for this piece of work. At the same time, we're building relationships in our community with the university. And Liz Avery is a passionate operator. Her role was providing field placements to students. So we started building connection with the next generation of public health professional, health science professional, and we made contact with the local kindergarten. And we developed a local Think Big First storybook, because we know that that's what's going to connect with the children, that we had to make it something that would resonate with their worldview. So here's Chelsea, the wonderful student on placement, and we would go and visit the kindies. And there was messaging in the book, not only for the children, but for the parents, and every child that would take the book home. And all of the evidence that was underpinning was woven, or woven, I should say, into the book. So the parents could understand that this, what we're trying to deal with, is very, very serious, despite the fact that it might be coming across in a very pleasant way. We even wrote the Think Big First song. I won't play it to you, but I can guarantee it's one of the most, I want to say annoying, loops of music that catchy, thank you, Gav, catchy tunes that even now I still sing it. And if any of you are interested, I'll sing it to you. But again, it's trying to take walking, take the issue of walking into the daily lives of children. So after they read the book, Chelsea takes them on a walk, and we show them how do you navigate your local community. So many children, we would put maps there, and they didn't know where their house was. They didn't know how to get from their house to the kindy, because they'd always gone past it 60 kilometres an hour. So just that very nature of getting early children to walk around their local community is incredibly rewarding. You can imagine the experiences. We have the magnifying glasses, and gave them that opportunity to have a visceral connection with the world in which they live in, that they grew up in. At the same time, we're working with lots of other schools. We make connections with Graham Denton, who's a professional educator, also a nutritionist, and health promoter for the past 20 odd years. And his work is all about trying to bring serious health issues into a performance landscape. So it's a very engaging way to start working with schools. And again, the script has all been written and designed using the latest evidence that we have, but delivered in a way that makes sense to the children. So you can see lots of humour, lots of positive messaging around walking. We don't want to burden the children with this be healthy or else kind of message. It's not what children are going to connect with. So we make it fun, we make it engaging, we make it entertaining. The work that we've done with Westminster School, they love it. They love the fact that their children can go and have a real life learning experience. So this is Grant Bock, he's the head of the prep school at Westminster School, and he approached us and said, we'd like to do more of this. The notion of children learning in their community is something that we want to pursue even further. So we started talking about what could the children do. So we asked the children, and the children said we should tell the council what to do. So all of the information that they gathered on their walk, they decided they would put it into a report, and they asked me, how do we put a report to council, how does it work? And they wrote it. These 4 children here represented the grade 5s at Westminster School. For the first time, the City of Marion had children in the chamber, and they spoke about how important it was for them to know their community, because it was anonymous to them. They didn't feel like they knew it as well as they probably could and how they probably should. So I would be probably a little dishonest if I hadn't tried earlier in the piece to get the City of Marion to sign the international part of walking and to develop a strategy for walking. It took me 7-8 months. I was talking to elected members and CEOs and executives. Sorry, Fraser. The night that the children presented, council agreed to it because of the children, and Rob Tolley's next visit, we actually signed the International Charter for Walking. So anybody can sign that charter, and I would encourage you to do it. Obviously it's a piece of paper, but what it does represent is a public commitment to increasing walking in our cities, in our suburbs, because if for nothing else, it benefits our children. My children, your children, our children. And if you have it, put it up publicly, whether you're in a school, local council, health service, university, make it public that this is something that you're going to commit to. At the same time, we realised that we had to get this message more broadly than just working with schools. So this is Danielle Clark. She was one of my staff members within the Opal program, a fantastic advocate for physical activity, particularly because she's a nutritionist. So we released the program through our neighbourhood centres, through our library networks, that people could come alone at the pedometer and just get a sense of how far they were walking, how much were they walking. No point giving them the amount without giving them some way of working out how to achieve that. So through that program, we achieved 80 million steps for all the people that were walking. They could log their steps in a spreadsheet, and we were calculating with schools and with community centres how much we had shifted people's physical activity behaviours through walking. Conversations with the schools continued, and as Tim said, it's a really nice landscape with which we can start to impact the next generation. And so again, a lot of work that we did, we're encouraging the children to take the lead. And one of the first simple things they did was, can we count how many children actually walk to school? It's a very, very powerful number, because you can work it out as a percentage. And if you give it to the children, you gave them the infrastructure, the resources behind it, to measure their count. And the children were so excited. You could see them willing themselves on. We had a lot of feedback from parents saying that this one simple gesture made them think about it, because the children would say, why are we walking everywhere? Why do we have to walk? Why can't we walk? Why do we have to drive everywhere? And just that very simple question from a child to a parent is enough to just recalibrate the thinking. And a lot of parents saying, yeah, I walked when I was a kid. And not a huge amount has changed. The distances are arguably still pretty similar. But there's a cultural shift. And the data that Tim presents on car ownership and the urban planning change, we're going in the wrong direction. We need to start to change that. And I think doing it through the kids is a really powerful way of doing that. In the time that the council had spent since the meeting with the children came, the second recommendation that the children said was we need a strategy. So all of the information that the children submitted was put in writing. We engaged a consultancy firm, Oxygen, who are landscape urban designers, to come in and write the strategy with us. We partnered with the state government, obviously local government, other local governments, with schools, to make sure that the content had relevance. It wasn't a plan that was written by council for council, it was written by community for community. As a result of this work, it was submitted to the Australian Institute of Landscape Architects, and it won a national award. And I'm not sure if you can read the text, but essentially the underlying that I've put in here is to say that it's a public commitment of the council to embed walking into everything they do. And this was probably 24 months ago. I spent some time post-Opal working in the city of Marion in the area of walking and health. And I'm very, very proud to say that it is still very much on the agenda, that people are taking this serious. They can see the benefits and they want to achieve the changes that we're talking about. The kids at the schools didn't want to stop there. One of the other issues that they identified is we've got no idea where we go. We walk to the end of our street, I don't know where I am, I don't know where the park is, I don't know where the shops are, I don't know where I'm going. So they said, why can't we paint directions on the stogie poles? What would you paint? We asked them. And they said, well, tell us where the dog park. So we had probably 200 different drawings of all the things that children thought should be on stogie poles. We contacted SA Power Networks. They were happy to give us the permission. Unfortunately, because of the conclusion of that program, we didn't get an opportunity to fully implement this. But any of you that are connected to schools or local councils, my dream is that we have a standardised signage system for walkers. We have it for cars and it goes right around the country. Why don't we have it for walking? Not that crazy an idea. All the infrastructure is there. This is another thing the kids said. No one smiles in the community when you go walking. We paint messages on there. So if you take one thing away from my presentation today, take this one away. It's my favourite. Council, again, further committing to it, we realised that people needed water and drinking fountains along the way. Again, this is what the children said. So through the Opal program and working with the council, we started to put water fountains, schools with water fountains, some chilled, in key locations on thoroughfares to encourage people to walk. And we found that people were starting to walk. People would go and walk in certain areas in certain directions because they knew there were fountains there. So again, we're trying to modify the environment at the same time we're modifying policies. The children, again, further committing to it, we realised that people needed water and drinking fountains along the way. Again, this is what the children said. No one smiles in the community when you go walking. We paint messages on there. So if you take one thing away from my presentation today, take this one away. It's my favourite. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that to bring about the changes that we require, we do need that multi-strategic intervention all happening at the same time. So you can see we were running programs, we were doing research, doing surveys, we were building non-traditional partnerships between universities, schools, councils, kindergartens. We had the policy component, we had the walking strategy, we signed the charter, we started to play in environmental change, and there's more to come within the City of Marion. We raised awareness about it. We want people to start talking about walking. Even if they don't agree with us, at least they're talking to us about it. That's a good start. Get people thinking about it, then they'll talk about it, then you can start to use the data, use the evidence to bring about the change. So I guess in conclusion, I just would like to reinforce the fact that if we're going to bring about these changes, we do need to start to break down some of those boundaries. We need to bring educators into councils, into health services. We need to start to cross-pollinate all of the wisdom that we have that is tried and true, but do it in a way so that it benefits the whole community. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Fraser, for such an interesting and encouraging presentation. It's always nice to hear about work happening with the community and the difference that this can make. For me, I think it was reminiscing a bit because I had also had a bit of time as Open Manager at Charles Sturt, and I think making a difference is all about connecting with the community, both decision makers and children, families, anybody out there, helping with experiencing the environment in a way that speaks about what we need to do to it to improve accessibility for walking. And I know pushing my mum around in a wheelchair, that is one way of finding out how much improvement there needs to be to some of the infrastructure around councils and around the place. Try doing that for a while, then you'll find the spots that need improving. And building up that communication between those people that can make those changes, local council or the Department of Transport, and getting some of those things into place, as well as getting some commitment around strategy and planning, makes a big difference. So far we've heard the evidence and ideas on how to encourage our communities to walk more and make some of those changes out there. But what about the emerging concept of wellbeing and its connection with physical activity? Where does that come in? Well, Gabrielle Kelly is the SAHMRI Wellbeing and Resilience Centre's inaugural director. She's a filmmaker, digital media executive, social entrepreneur and strategist. She has worked on human behaviour and systems change in a range of settings. In her previous role, Gabrielle ran the groundbreaking Adelaide Things in Residence program, leading significant implementation of change in city design, advanced manufacturing, early childhood education and positive psychology, which of course included the commissioning and leadership of Professor Martin Seligman's residency. This explored the value of positive psychology in building mental wellbeing and resilience and reducing mental illness. South Australia has now accepted Professor Seligman's challenge to become the state of wellbeing, measuring, building and embedding positive psychology and wellbeing and resilience science in the community at large. The vision is to use Professor Seligman's dashboard of wellbeing, which includes positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning and accomplishment, aka PERMA, as a public health message for all citizens across all age groups and cohorts. Like Stoops Lobster, PERMA Plus will become the clarion call for a mentally healthy society in Australia. I'll now hand over to Gabrielle to present the rationale behind the complementary relationship between physical activity and the standard PERMA approach.
And excuse me, I'm asthmatic today, you can hear it in my voice. I think I'll stop coughing. There we are. It's going fast. Thank you very much, and thank you for that introduction. I'm blown away by the last two presentations, so excuse me leaving in the midst of your lecture, didn't want to disturb you. But yeah, that's right. But I really am blown away by, I actually wish I had time to run upstairs and revamp what I'm going to say to you, because you've really set up a whole lot of ideas in my mind. Hands up those who feel the same way about the ideas that are pinging around their brains. Absolutely, it's very, very stimulating. While I give you the first bit of this presentation, can I ask you to stand up, since I don't want to be responsible for shortening the telomeres. Anyone who wants to walk around for a moment while I begin my opening comments, please don't do it if you don't want to. Don't stand up if you don't want to either, but feel free to do so for the first couple of minutes of my comments. Some of you have heard some of this before, and I'm just going to race through some context for you. I don't want to bore those of you who've heard it, but I also don't want to leave people high and dry who don't understand what we are. We are the SAHMRI Wellbeing and Resilience Centre, born on the 19th of May last year, but about to be formally launched on April the 30th. We're a startup inside the great big startup, which is the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute. We're incredibly honoured to be here. And our objective is to build a state of wellbeing and make public health, take a public health approach to building positive mental health assets in the whole population, specifically using measurement and proven interventions to improve individual wellbeing. So I was so excited to hear about the details of thinking about how to unlock activity and commitment in a society that the Opal Project has shown us. I think that's a terrific story, and wonderful to hear about the inspiring research. You know, the link between research and action is a really interesting link. Knowing stuff is not by itself necessarily the thing that motivates people to do things, and yet the knowing is so critical to create the desire for change. So just wriggle around while I talk to you for a couple more minutes and then sit down anytime you want. So we're here, you're here. Many of you we've seen before. We're so grateful that this event was booked out in a day and a half, and that even when we had to make a major change to the event, that you were able to come. Many of you are familiar faces to the Wellbeing and Resilience Centre and to us, and we particularly welcome you back here today. Let me just quickly reprise on the Seligman trigger. We use the same strategy as Rodney Tolley has given to the state, which is we brought in a world leader. That's what the Thinkers in Residence program is. It brings in a world leader to kickstart activity and interest in the area. You bring in somebody who many people can admit knows more than us, and who we think many people are prepared to listen to because they have good credentials or good academic credentials, or they've written a lot of books. That's Professor Seligman. Why did we bring him here? We brought him here. I'm not going to read these statistics, but the cost of mental illness is high. It's high for people as individuals, 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 of young people, and it's very high for the country and the state. So we were interested to find out whether or not the science of positive psychology might have something to offer that. Here's not a new idea, but here's another idea. So if you can take your mind and move it sideways for a moment. This came out of some of the work we did with Professor Alex Kalashay in the Active Ageing report. And this is the fact of the longevity revolution. Anyone who wants to sit down now can. Anyone who doesn't want to, feel free to keep standing. But basically, we're living, if you live in the wealthy West, we're living 30 years longer than we lived 100 years ago. Alex calls it the longevity revolution, and I can direct you to where his report is. So if you were this was a typical picture of a man's life. If you put the work in child raising and agriculture, you would have a woman's life. Basically, we lived till about that many years. We died shortly after we stopped working if we were a man. The reason they put the Bismarck came up with the idea of the retirement stipend was because it was expected that everybody would be dead shortly after. They never dreamt that the old age pension would be required for 20, 25 or 30 years for very large numbers of people. So this is now typical of a woman's life course today. She goes to school, she does learning, she does working, she does relationship work. Many women have children, not all women do, but many women have children. So there's a lot of caring work in a woman's life. There's often working again as well as caring in parallel. Sometimes there's a bit of continuing education. Then there's a whole bunch of caring that hits the woman's life from about mid-40s onwards as she begins to care for other people in the community, such as parents, her husband's parents, neighbours, etc. And then there's this lengthy retirement period now, the gift of the 20th century to people living in the 21st century. It is a gift. It is a lucky break, but it's It's an opportunity that has good and bad elements in it. So this is what we think, Alex thinks a woman's life course looks like today. This is what we think a woman's life course is going to look like in the future. There will be more of an overlap between leisure and learning and working and caring. We already all know pretty much that people are often only in particular jobs for 3 to 5 years at a time. So people don't have the same continuity of work that they used to have. Women had less continuity of work than men because often they took years off for caring for children and others. But this is what we think a woman's life is going to look like. There's going to be a lot more education. It's longer again. There's still a very long period of retirement. This is what we think a man's life looks like today. There's learning, there's working, there's caring. Men are doing increasingly more caring with their children if they have them, and they're increasingly involved in the caring of parents and other people, part of their kinship group, and there's a very long period of retirement. And this is what we think it's going to look like in the future. Again, much more overlapping between leisure, learning, working, caring. Periods of sabbatical. People will probably pay for their own sabbaticals as they move from one career to the next. They'll take time to recharge their batteries because people will find they haven't got the juice to keep going all that time with all that change in the workplace without resuscitation, and sabbatical is quite a good thing for human beings in that regard. This, I stress, is Professor Alex Calashay's work, and it's in his report, which you can find on, I think, is in Resident's website, and I recommend it to you. We're also interested, so there's one other idea. We're interested in this concept of life course that we heard talked about earlier on today. The research from the World Health Organization, and again I thank Alex for drawing our attention to this, shows really clearly that the functional capacity of people is built up best if you build it up before the age of 30. So if someone is born healthy, born into enough wealth to have good food, and good advice about healthy behaviours in their early childhood, get enough kind of physical activity, get enough kind of education offerings, get good food, nutrition, etc., then they're likely to reach a high level of functional capacity before they're 30. And then, of course, it's downhill all the way to death, because from the cradle to the grave there's an irreducible relationship, and basically from the minute we're born we begin to die. And there's no argument about that fact. So our job as parents and teachers and policymakers and community-minded people and citizens in a democracy is to think about how can we build the functional capacity of people to be as high as possible so that as they start to decline from their peak and go on that curve towards death, that the curve is not too steep. Obviously I'm not talking about here with people with chronic illness and people with other disability. This is using broad generalisations about health and well-being for a whole society. So what we want to do is reduce the curve of that decline towards death. We would like people to die. I was so happy when I heard Fraser died, Prime Minister Fraser died after only a short illness. That is the perfect thing. That is what we all want. We know that there will be some kind of collapse before we die, because death is a natural result, and usually things start to fall apart. But it would be good if they only fell apart just before we died. It would be really good for the federal health budget. It would be really good for me. Has a person like that happen to them? I think we could unite around that. Now, the great thing that Alex and many other people who are involved in this research tell us is that even if you didn't get to build your functional capability up to the top, the best peak performance by 30 for male or female, you can still interrupt that decline all the way through before you die. So if you start doing physical activity when you're 55 and you've never really done much before, you can get good results. You can affect that curve, and the same applies to mental well-being as well. So this concept is a concept which we're taking on board as a really important concept, and we're really interested in a life course approach to building mental health and resilience. So, back to the Seligman story, we brought it in as a trigger. We wondered whether we could take a public health approach to improving mental health and well-being, and we wondered whether positive psychology, sorry I've done something weird with that image there, could be used and could be useful. Overwhelmingly, we brought Martin here. We gathered together a terrific bunch of partners and investors. We worked really hard for 2.5 years. We had 14,000 people plus come to events and meetings. Overwhelmingly, the feeling and the reaction was that, yes, this is interesting. We involved him with teachers, the professions of teachers, psychiatrists and psychologists.
A couple of years ago, I waved the banner that 51% of the world's adults should be flourishing by 2051 by positive psychology criteria. So what's needed is for well-being to be on the political agenda, and more importantly, to be in the work and work of the community. That community is about increasing the well-being of the individuals in it. And Wellbeing in South Australia opens the question of how you go from individual well-being, which we now know how to measure, and even something about how to build. So how do you do this for an entire community or an entire state?
And this is the job of the Wellbeing and Resilience Centre. I'm going to flick through some slides, so don't worry if things flick through behind me, just stick with me because I need to shorten what I'm going to say. Our exploration is to see whether we can build wellbeing and resilience at the level of public health. Can we take a slip, slop, slap approach in order to bring knowledge about positive mental health assets into the broad community? These were the groups of people that Mark was involved in throughout his residency. His key message is that wellbeing is measurable, teachable and learnable, and our job is to make that available to the whole of South Australia in order to learn for the rest of the world how to build positive mental health assets at scale. We are referring and using Seligman's theory of wellbeing. His theory of wellbeing is the following. If you improve your positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning and accomplishment, he has good evidence to suggest that you will improve your well-being, you will improve your flourishing and your resilience. That's PERMA. We think that concept is a communicatable concept. We have found that people can understand that concept well and they can learn it well. We think it would be a great idea if every parent who has a child, and one of my dear friends is planning to have a child soon here in the audience today, imagine if those parents not only thought they were responsible for the good nutrition of their children and the good sleep of their children, but also for the PERMA of their children. Imagine if people knew what PERMA meant and took responsibility for their own PERMA and the PERMA of people they love or employ. Now, I'm going to skip a whole lot of slides. There's a report that you can find if you Google Thinkers in Residence. I recommend it to you. It's a very good report. It's got all of the academic research which supports Seligman's science. So I'm going to flick through these detailed things about PERMA. You can find all of that in the report, and it's not critical for today. What is critical today is this slide, that we're interested in building PERMA because we're interested in building positive mental health assets for the whole society. But we know there's more to it. We're dealing with and working with other researchers globally who are experts in positive mental health, and they tell us that there is so much research, and we've just heard it this morning, about physical fitness, nutrition and sleep, that you can't ignore that research. So we're interested in building what we call PERMA Plus. We're interested in building PERMA, positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning and accomplishment, but we're also interested in all the research which tells us we've got to know about physical fitness, nutrition and sleep, and optimism also is a very important issue if you want a resilient population. So that's the PERMA Plus that we're talking about. We've taken the ideas that Martin Seligman has given us and the great research that he's led, and we've added to it by working with other global researchers to come up with this concept. And that is the business of the Wellbeing and Resilience Centre, to do that at scale. And thus my great interest in the systematic way we've approached implementing the Opal project, because that is what we are doing. And I won't go much further in my slides, but simply to say we have attracted about $2.8 million worth of investment into a range of projects to do precisely this. We've got a pilot project going for an aged population involving 7 councils, and we are looking to see whether we can improve the resilience of people who are getting older living in the community, because to be older you need to be resilient because things keep happening. I know that. This is my asthma, coughing, blah, blah, blah. It's probably going to get worse. I'm going to need to be resilient in order to be able to keep working and handle that challenge into the future. And that applies to many of us in many different ways. We're also doing a project with the 2 companies in the north of Adelaide, Futurus and Eurotech. The workers in those companies know that they will not have a job within 2 years because they're auto industry workers, and those companies are leaving South Australia. We thought it could be useful to offer resilience training to that workforce in order to prepare them for the challenge coming ahead. We're talking to the Women's and Children's Hospital. It's not determined yet, but they're showing a lot of interest in doing, and indeed with the Professor Marie McCready's here inside SAHMRI, on offering resilience training, measurement and training to parents of premature babies. Because if you have a premature baby, it could be helpful to be resilient because it's very demanding. And we're launching a range of projects inside many schools. We've got hundreds of schools working with us and about 100 schools working actively with us on the question of wellbeing and resilience. So I'm going to stop there because they're telling me I must stop. There's much more to our story, but of relevance today is the reason why we've added physical activity, nutrition and sleep to PERMA measure is because the evidence, which you heard from Tim earlier on, is compelling. You couldn't possibly be interested in mental health assets and building them and not pay attention to that aspect of it as well. So you'll be hearing more about PERMA Plus, I hope, and I hope you'll come along and join us for lots of various events that we will have. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gabrielle. That was very interesting, and I've been looking forward all week to hearing your presentation today, because of all the presentations, this was the one I knew the least about, although I have done quite a bit of reading, and it helped me to appreciate what the PERMA approach is all about. And I was especially interested that there's PERMA happening in the workplace, because I feel that is certainly a need out there in the community, and it's great that you're out north where they're in most need of that support. And I also am very encouraged by the other community programs in schools and elsewhere, and look forward to coming back for future presentations to hear how they're going, because connecting with the community, of course, is one of the ways we can make a difference in this space. And that's where we're going to now. How might we all participate in a focus for South Australia about improving wellbeing? Clearly, physical activity has a place in building wellbeing of South Australians, as we've just heard, and one of the most accessible and popular options is walking. Wendy is Senior Research Translation Manager in the Wadapurunga unit here at SAHMRI. She joined the team in July 2014 and works on projects to improve the cardiovascular health of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Prior to this position, she spent almost 11 years as Director of Cardiovascular Health at the Heart Foundation in South Australia, where she chaired the Active Living Coalition. She is now the Chair of Walking SA and also chairs the South Australian Cardiac Clinical Network Prevention and Rehabilitation Working Group. Walking SA is increasingly taking a leadership role and positioning itself as the peak body for the broad walking agenda across South Australia. Walking SA's aim is to advocate for an increase in supporting infrastructure, policy and promotion of walking to support and get more people walking more often. As a membership organisation, Walking SA is aiming to expand its membership base, engaging community members like ourselves to become supporters of the organisation. The Strategic Partnerships team would again like to thank Wendy for stepping in today. Your presentation complements the program and will ensure we all are more aware of Walking SA's goals and directions and how we might all be able to get involved in this growing organisation. Thanks, Wendy.
It's great to be here, and it's an opportunity for Walking SA. I want to take you back a little way. That I was lucky enough to go a few years ago to the International Conference on Walking. It's called Walk 21. It's in Vancouver, and I presented there at the conference. But what I learned at that, and some of my colleagues here today have also been to Walk 21 conferences, is that walking is something that needs a voice. Walking is something that happens, but it's almost invisible in our society. And unless we can actually rally together to give it a voice and to put it on the map, per se, it actually is hidden. Yet, we know it's the thing most people do for physical activity, and many people do it for mental health reasons as well, because it makes them feel good. Getting out and having a walk, whether it's in the bush, whether it's around the street, it's actually getting out and having a walk. So there's a real place for something around walking. So today I want to bring to life a vision that I guess I've had since I came back from Vancouver, and other people who are here today, I've shared it with over the years, and it's really about creating an entity that's actually going to be the voice and that hopefully all of you want to be part of, because that's what I'm on about at the moment. So Walking SA, let me tell you that story. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that I do pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land, the Kaurna people. And by working in an Aboriginal unit, I'm absolutely committed to paying my respect to elders past and present. And the amazing knowledge you can get from that source is quite compelling for the work we're doing in the walking space. So the vision of Walking SA, as was mentioned when I was introduced, was to get more people, more South Australians, walking more often. Sounds really basic, but you know what? We need to actually put some effort in if we're going to make it happen. We're actually taking an organisation and transitioning it from a peak body for bushwalking to a peak all-walking body. Peak body for all walking. So we're trying to get people who, initially, there has been a successful peak body for bushwalking groups, and you may not have ever heard of it, but certainly the members are bushwalking groups, and we are now looking at expanding that. There was a review that was done into the group probably about 2 years ago now, and one of the outcomes were that let's try and make it a broader base for walking. Who is Walking? Who is Walking SA? We're a not-for-profit group that leads, promotes and supports all forms of walking in South Australia, including walking for recreation, transport, health, wellbeing, organised adventures, organised events, environmental appreciation, fun and general experiences. I'd like to acknowledge there's a few of my board members here, so hello and thank you for coming. And we've got a very active board now that includes many of the people from walking groups, but also a broader base of others that are committed to raising the profile of walking and really getting more people walking more often. We do represent the clubs, but we also have a range of both formal and informal members and individuals and organisations who believe in trying to align with what we're trying to do. We've recently developed a new strategic plan, and the strategic themes, no surprises for an organisation that's trying to redevelop itself: governance, finance, sustainability and growth, partnership development, communication, marketing and promotion. So there'll be no surprises for any of you that have been involved in groups and trying to develop them into something else. Sustainability and growth is something that we're really positioning ourselves very much in how we can do this efficiently. At the moment we're small, but we do know that developing a strong supporter base is a fundamental. If you look what's happened in South Australia around Biking SA or Bicycle SA, they've been able to really harness the energy of bike riders and actually get them as supportive members, and really that's where we're heading with walking. We need to understand the needs of walkers so that they can actually feel that they can be part of something like this. Our potential partners, who are they? Walking groups. We've got a good representation from the Heart Foundation. We've got a massive walking groups program across the state, and we're really keen to ensure that we can get people up off the couch and joining groups. Not to say that walking groups are for everybody, and I'm a walker and I'm not a walking group person, and many of you will go, yeah, I don't want to join groups. But lots of people do, because they don't feel safe until you actually give them an opportunity with someone. It's that supportive environment stuff. So often people will be told by their doctor to go walking. They won't quite know how to do it, but they'll find a group, they'll join a group, and they'll stay because they connect people. It's the social stuff that keeps them going back, and it's very evident from the stories from the groups. And it's the same with the bushwalking groups. We like to think of a continuum where we're getting people up off the couch, joining a walking group, and then perhaps they'll progress into something more of a bushwalking group, which is able to explore the rural native environment. There's no doubt that we've got partners that are non-government organisations, commercial sector. Really important to recognise the potential of the commercial sector, and because there's lots of tour operators, there's lots of people that have gear shops, all those things. We need to work with them. State government departments, local government and media. And interestingly, we just did a major audit across South Australia of trails, and one of the main groups that actually put energy into developing trails enterprise and local government, by far and away the biggest contributor into the development of trails. So we're talking about walking in terms of trails and infrastructure. We're also talking about urban walking and walking around and making sure there's footpaths, and looking at Tim's story around footpaths. It's really important. Evidence will tell us that one of the best bit of infrastructure to invest in to get people walking is a footpath, and without it, it's a real flaw. And the media, I didn't mention that there. The media, and actually started to develop partnerships with the media, so they come to us for stories. I did an amazing thing the other day, I don't know if any of you caught it, but we were talking about a new trail that was actually being opened up in the Mount Lofty area, and it was potentially to take people off the Waterfall Gully Trail. I got lots of media. I couldn't believe it was such a story. But people are interested in this space, and if we can actually generate people to talk about walking, it's actually a good thing, whether they like it or not, as you said, Fraser. So last week we actually had a President's Forum where we had the leaders of all the bushwalking clubs come together, our board members and other key stakeholders, and asked them to focus on sustainability and growth for Walking SA. What should we be doing for the future to make a difference in this space? How can we develop a sustainable organisation? What can we learn by the good things that you guys have been doing that we can package to actually deliver this into the future? And it was amazing, the depth of knowledge and the skills and the excitement that was generated from all these groups that have been wondering how they could tell us their story for ages, and they were able to do it. So the priorities for 2015 to 2016, of course, efficient operations, governance, finance, communications, those sort of things. And then it's around sustainability and growth. And I invite you to actually participate in that one. We're putting together a broad survey where we're actually going to ask people about what they would like to contribute to, or what they would like a walking organisation to be able to do for them. So I encourage you, we've got little brochures up the back, but if anyone wants to contact us, we'd love to put you on the mailing list for the survey. We want to look at membership expansion, and we want to identify people who would be supporters. And one thing that's happened in other organisations is getting people to believe in what their organisation is about and getting to join up as supporters. Develop partnerships, as I've mentioned. We've got a great website and it's going to get better. We are looking to really raise the profile of the organisation every which way, events and newsletters. But we know that there's a long way to go, but we know that there's some energy that needs to be injected. The last thing I wanted to mention is around advocacy, and around advocacy for walking. And there's no doubt joining with other partners to have a voice is really important. Now, getting here, how many people walked here? How'd you find it? How did you find it? It's pretty hard work walking around this place at the moment. The reality is it's a building site. We've got a building site there, we've got a building site there, there will be more building sites. But in the big vision, and I'm sure Gabe's seen upstairs, there's beautiful bridges that go across the railways to actually link us to the river and to link that whole precinct around the river. Now, if I've had any experience in the last 10 years, the walking infrastructure will be the first thing to go when the dollars get tight. I will be really, really pleased if I ever see that bridge being built. I really hope I do. But let me tell you, it's going to be one of my priorities in the next 5 years to advocate for that bridge, because the potential of that getting cut is really high. Many infrastructure projects around the place, cycling is starting to get a Guernsey and gets put into the plans. Everything gets put in the plans at first, and then it gets cut. You know that story. So I think we have to actually develop a voice, because if we want people to walk, we have to build it. And that's one of Rodney's messages. You build a walking environment, people will walk. Simple as that. So that's really our mandate for Walking SA. So if anyone would like to come along on that journey with me and with the board and with our other members of Walking SA, we'd love to have you. Because to create an environment, and this is going to be a high profile one, I'd love Gabe to be part of that, but certainly thinking about how we can connect up the whole of this fantastic new development for Adelaide to make it a walking environment should be where we're heading. So the call to action, find out more about Walking SA, visit the website, join us as a supporter, receive our newsletter, and we look forward to the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, for your presentation. It's good to know that there's such a proactive group we can get involved in, and that they are looking out for the interests of walkers at every opportunity. And I like the sound of your broad survey, and manage to take the time to fill that out when I do. The other thing that came to mind is that one of the things I've been involved with over the last few months is the citizens' jury around cycling, and certainly the Premier seems very keen on engaging citizens around pertinent issues, and maybe that's another thing we could be looking towards, a citizens' jury for walking. Would, I think, maybe ring some bells. It's now time for all of you to get involved and ask some questions of our speakers. So it's my time to finish up here, and Gabrielle was going to take over for me and manage our panel session. So I invite the speakers to come back up and join Gabrielle up here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Would you like to take a seat? Do we have microphones here? Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, we've had a lot today. We've had the best research in the world, some breakthrough research, really dramatic research. I think we heard at the beginning stuff I hadn't heard before, which blew my socks off. So thank you so much for that. We've had really good stories about implementation, very powerful implementation going on. You talked about collaboration, top down, bottom up. We've got an example of a community organisation unlocking. In every quadrant, it seems to be about passion, vision, drive, determination, and it would appear that they're pretty critical to getting anything done. I'd really like to invite anyone from the audience to ask this terrific panel some questions. Would anybody like to start? Do we have mics here? We have, Kim's got the mic, got two mics. I'll start. You're all leaders in your field. What have you found has worked most effectively to speed up the implementation of some marvellous research into broad understanding of the society? Can we start with you?
What's worked to speed up?
Yes. Yeah. Well, what's an example of some great research that you've been involved with or heard about where it's moved to change in the community, and how did that happen?
I think probably the things that have most effective has been the drive for environmental change. So the sort of work that Jim Salas is doing with IPEN, the National Study of the Environment, and it's led to a whole lot of micro changes. So it's a pretty simple thing, honestly, about the hills and the playgrounds. Nothing's had enormous effect. It's just actually painting lines on school playgrounds, lines for the netball courts and basketball courts. So I think it's that consciousness now that the environment can provide a little nudge towards physical activity. It doesn't have to be big things, it can be major change, small changes like that. So I think a whole lot of thousands and thousands of micro changes going on, gradually increasing levels of physical.
So that's a bit linked to the behavioural economics work on nudging people into new behaviour, and that's something I think we could recommend to everybody in this audience to think about how you're going to nudge. Really relates to your small steps.
Yes, that's right.
How are you going to nudge yourself into new behaviour change? How are you going to nudge the people you love, the people you can influence? I'll leave that with you as an open question. Can I hear from either of you two about that?
I think you're right in terms of nudging. I'm more of a pushing fan. I love a little nudge every now and again, but I think sometimes we have to be a little bit more forceful with the message, and we do need to push. Years ago, I was lucky enough to work with a disability advocate, and she gave me the idea of forcing the environmental change yourself. So I used to work at the Office for Rec and Sport, and one day I printed an A4 sign on the top floor that said, "This toilet is out of order." And for 4 days, everybody walks to the bottom of the stairs. No one even went into the toilet to see what was wrong with it. So I think there are lots of little things that you can do. Most importantly is make the commitment to yourself that be the change that you want to see. And it sounds cliche, but it's what works. People follow people. They don't follow plans. They don't follow policies. People follow people. So be one of those people worth following.
My message from the experience I've had is make friends with people that are actually going to work with you, and actually share a vision with people, and then do something that everyone can participate on that journey. And I think our experience with the Active Living Coalition was actually getting people around the table that don't always have to be like-minded. They have to be people that can work along on that project, and then actually work out something that you can all do together, so you all learn and experience participating together. And it's amazing how much you can get momentum and build momentum and actually take people on that journey. Really important to make friends.
This reminds me of a quote from Martin Luther King. It came from someone before him, but the quote is, that the moral arc of the universe bends slightly towards justice. Is the quote. The moral arc of the universe bends slightly towards justice. But my view on that is that you have to have benders. And I think we've got a few benders on the stage, and we've probably got benders in the audience if you've come here to listen to this, that the future's going to come regardless of what we do. The question is, if we want to influence that future in positive ways, we have to do stuff. And it's a good idea to do stuff that's got good research behind it, because you can confidently say it's got a good evidence base behind it, but then you have to step over that chasm of knowing and doing, which is what we're talking about here. We really do want a question from you, though. If somebody like to ask a question, thank you. Please introduce yourself, and be lovely if you stood up too. Thank you. Others, if you prepare your questions, if you would.
Yeah, Peter McFarlane is an interested participant. I always remember a quote from nutritionist Rosemary Stanton, who once said, according to the stats, there's an inverse relationship between the number of dietitians graduating and the level of poor nutrition or of nutrition or health in the community, and I suspect the same relationship probably exists in the exercise sector. So, and I suspect that's because of the forces that drive community towards poor nutrition and lack of exercise are overwhelming. So my question is, how do we get the momentum and the critical mass to actually make a difference to the community?
The critical mass, again, we might as well start with you if you don't mind.
Yeah, quite right. There are, I think, two sorts of inertia which keep people inactive. One's the biological inertia, so the fact that we're geared to be inactive. We evolved in an era of energy scarcity, and it makes sense in an era of energy scarcity environment where there's not enough energy and enough food around to eat as much as you can when you can, and to do as little as possible as you absolutely have to. Unfortunately, in those days, the environment obliged us to be active. So we had to hunt and so forth to get that food together. So that's the biological inertia. We're always programmed, essentially, unless it's programmed to be inactive. But there's also socioeconomic inertia as well. We saw that partly in that study I showed about the change in energy expenditure and occupation, that what the cost of the product depends largely on the labour that goes into it. So if we can use less labour to produce a product, that's driving wheels of the industry. That's what all companies want to do. And so that's one of the drivers, and same with consumption as well. There's no market for labour creating devices. There's any amount of market for labour saving devices. Everyone thinks, well, this is marvellous. I know I'm going to have to wind down the windows. So we're facing that too, as you say, enormous inertia, the biological and socioeconomic inertia. I don't think there's any simple solution to it. They say there are two broad classes of solution. One's to change the environment in such a way as to basically oblige us, or at least nudge us to be active, in lots of little ways. And the other is to give people the individual resources to have the confidence, the discipline, and self-efficacy to be able to resist those forces.
Now, which I hope is where some of the work we do, we're leading the PERMA, might fit in. That if we give people more access to psychological concepts and assets, which have been around for a long time, they're not new, these concepts really, but if we can allow more people to have access to those concepts, to exert a bit more emotional self-regulation, a little bit more self-awareness of their own life, then people may find it easier by their own working of their own minds to come to the conclusion that they want to support a healthy lifestyle choice, is the hope. Other comments?
Yeah, I guess from my point of view, I'll take your point that as we over-professionalise some of these issues, people start to distance themselves from their own ability to engage with it. So I think the first thing is we can, certainly from a walking point of view, is debunk the myth that you need to be an expert to advocate for it. That every single person in this room has the power to advocate as a citizen. And so I think that from my personal experience, that some of the most inspiring moments of my career have not come from working with professionals. They've come from working with grandparents, with parents, with carers, with educators. That they take the issue on, they see the benefit, and they see the critical importance for all of us. That if we have a high percentage of illness, we all suffer. So it's in our best interest, even if you take a self-interested worldview, it's in our best interest to get the whole population moving. So I think there's a lot of people that would nod and agree in the hours after this event to say, yeah, I'm going to do something about it. But how many of you and how many of us are actually going to do it? If there's one thing you do, join up the Walking SA, become that voice for walking. if not for yourself, for the next generation. I'm a father of two, and I know how hard it is. I walked my kids to school when I first started doing it. The number of cars that would pull over and ask me, "Are you okay? Why are you walking? Is there something wrong with your car?" No. Is there something wrong with your legs? I would say. So again, you don't have to be a professional.
I think people just want to help you. Well, one of the things that I've felt really excited about in the last few months is I ride to work every day because there's no parking here, probably a good thing, but I have to, so I'm riding my bike, which is great. But what's happened that's really different to 3 years ago is there's lots of other people riding bikes. And I was actually at the treasurer for Wellbeing saying, I met with him last weekend, he said, "Wendy, I was up around Stirling, there's people walking everywhere on a Sunday morning." So people are starting to do it. So it's about that, change agent. You get a bunch of people doing things, and then you change the environment a bit to make people feel comfortable and safe and secure, and then they're okay to do it. I mean, riding a bike in town still is a little dicey every now and then. I have to scream at people. But the reality is there are a lot more people doing it. And I was at a traffic lights the other day, and there was probably, 5 women around me at a traffic light on bikes. I mean, that's phenomenal. It would not have happened not too long ago. So I think Adelaide is moving in the right direction. It's going to take a long way to get everybody and all of South Australia more active. But if we can actually have role models and changing those cultural norms to say that it's actually acceptable and it's okay, then I think we're in the right direction.
I've got a story to add to that. We had Brigadier General Wanda Coleman in town a couple of weeks back. She started the resilience program in the US Army, and she's one of our advisors. She's a wonderful woman. And she said she didn't bring high heels with her this time, even though there was a public event. She said because everywhere we go, we walk. And she didn't look like that worried. She's incredibly fit, runs marathons, etc. But basically, I thought that was great. I've never heard anybody say that coming to Adelaide, they think we're a walking city, so much so that she didn't bother to bring her high heels. I think that was a good sign. Somebody else? Yes? There's a question here, thank you.
Hello. I'm a keen, environmentalist and lots of the things about walking and cycling. I'm wondering if you know how we could link that in Adelaide to actions that are good for us, but also our planet.
Who'd like to start off with that, responding to that question? Yeah.
Yes, it's a very good point. It's another reason, isn't it, to be active. I'll just give one simple example. It's some work that Caroline, the post office, is doing. And she's developed an app, basically, to get women to form teams to walk and to try and reach 500,000 steps in 50 days. But one thing she's got in that app is basically, this is how much carbon you've saved by walking and not driving. That's just a little example. I think if we all make that conscious effort to link physical activity to the environmental aspects, then we're doing pretty well.
Can I add something there too? If you think about PERMA, if you think about meaning, and you think about nature, and you think about what it is to be in nature and how nourishing nature is, to take steps to encourage people to feel that relationship to nature, I think is really positive.
Yeah, there's actually one slide I didn't have time to show, which actually showed exactly the relationship. It shows the relationship between levels of physical activity and where people live in relation to exposure to nature. And it's a very clear gradient, so the greater the exposure to nature, regardless of your level of socioeconomic well-being, the greater exposure to nature, the more physically active people are. So it works both ways.
I think because of the context of the world that we live in now, that the environmental agenda needs to have a strong economic argument alongside it. And we need to make the case for maintaining road infrastructure, car infrastructure is very, very expensive, and the costs dealing with the impact of emissions is also very, very expensive. So I think that the environment movement has been around since I've been a kid. So the message is there. We know what needs to happen. But I think unless we can illustrate to the decision makers who tend to be guided by the balance sheet that there is an economic value in and of itself to reducing car usage and increasing water.
You'll be pleased to know when we had our President's Forum last week, this came up from the members of the Bushwalking Clubs about how they can actually extend the knowledge that they have from environmental, many of them are environmentalists, and how we can actually extend that and share that with other members of the organisation and the voice that we have. So it was very much on the agenda of the members of Wellbeing SA, and I think it is something for our future to really look at that intersect.
There's a lot of work going on internationally, and it's here in Australia as well. It's called wild zones, wild spaces. And people are working to try and reintroduce children to being wild and free and not completely controlled and only allowed to go to plastic, red and yellow, blue kindergarten playgrounds. And I think that's quite interesting how that's emerging. And in South Australia there's a big attraction to the Reggio Emilia approach to education, and one of the fundamental principles in Reggio Emilia education is to have children associated with in nature, growing things and learning to have a relationship to and appreciate nature.
And I think the Nature Play organisation has just been established, and I think that's very much their agenda as well.
Somebody else? Oh yes, hi. Oh, sorry, I didn't come in.
Are you okay?
I'll be right. My name's Ian, and I'm just I was a bit depressed when you said... Did you have the mic? I was a bit depressed when you said that the more intense activity, the better, because I don't really like intense activity. And I've sort of taken comfort in the idea that, well, maybe in the longer term, you're better off doing moderate activity, because I've seen a lot of people get worn out with their intense activity. Has there been any work done in that in terms of the longer timescales? Great question, thank you.
Yeah, I think you're right. That was just on a minute-for-minute basis. So for every minute it's better to do intense exercise. But of course, we can't sustain intense exercise for such a long time. I said, and I suspect this is the case, it has to do just with the total amount of energy you use. So you may be better off doing a really low-intense exercise for a long period of time than for doing a high-intense exercise for a short period of time. And I suspect, I was talking to one of the world experts, Russ Pate, just the other month in Canada, and he sort of independently came to the same conclusion. I think that's the way that researchers begin to think. It's the total amount of energy turnover. It's just that we get there quicker doing intense exercise.
Can I ask you a question before you have your turn, which is I was trying to get John Ratey here as a thinker in residence because of his research about the benefits of high intensity, 40 minutes of high intensity and activity a day and the impact on the brain and the growing of new neural pathways. I still find that pretty thrilling.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and we really don't know if there are specific adaptations to high intensity exercise. And because people haven't been doing, using high intensity exercise for a long time, you don't know the long-term effects in terms of, like developing diabetes or cardiovascular disease or all-cause mortality. It's certainly very interesting.
He's got some great research about the impact on education and learning with young children by exposing younger people to high intensity activity. It's really interesting, I find.
Yeah, I think my original qualifications are actually in recreation and sports. So I come from very much leisure-based and enjoyment point of view. So I think there's a few years ago we had a conversation that the optimum range of enjoyment is a bit of a predictor of whether people will keep the behaviour up. So we come up with the term of you measure your pleasure velocity and pleasure P-L-E-I-S-U-R-E in smiles per hour. So I think if you're doing high intensity and your smiles per hour go down, I would wind it back. You're doing sort of like on the optimal range of smiles per hour.
Very good, smiles per hour, that's marvellous.
Yes, it's technical. I think I would concur with Fraser. I think people have to enjoy what they're doing, and so it's about enjoying it, and then you'll be able to hopefully sustain it. But we also know people go through cycles of exercise, and particularly the big women's study, Wendy Brown up in Queensland, it really shows that particularly women go through cycles, and that's actually a reality, and it's okay as long as you get back on the bike and go again, and don't just give up forever. So I think there are some things around lifestyle and around people's habits and what they have to fit into their day that allows them to do it, but we shouldn't give up forever. So I think the message is enjoy it and keep doing it.
Can I ask all of you a related question, which is I was working with a personal trainer and hating it and loving it. For the first 4 weeks, it scared me so badly before I went every time, I wanted to throw up. I mean, I really didn't want to go, but I made myself go. But after 4 weeks of going, I became more confident about it, I got stronger, it wasn't so scary to me, and then I was very happy to continue it for quite some time. But have you got any knowledge or research about the sort of how you get through the pain of lifting yourself up to a new level of intensity?
Yeah, I've got a really good story. Found out just recently, actually, on the gym joining and the quitting in Australia. It really surprised me. The most common month to join the gym is in August, and the most common month to leave the gym is in September. So yeah,
that's the 4 weeks.
That's the 4 weeks. So you get past that 4 weeks, you're okay, go.
Thank you. And there was a question down the back there, I think. Thank you.
their studies, fitness, recreation, sport and tourism. They're saying that behaviour takes 2 generations to really see it impacting on society. And I know, Tim, you did some studies with childhood obesity and that inertia starting to slow. And where do you think, if we were to put it in the time frame of 2 generations, where are we with this behaviour change?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My colleague Grant Tomkinson he's really the world expert on this. He's devoted a lifetime to an incredible data set, data on I think now over 70 million children from around the world. He's plotted historical trends in fitness and fatness of kids and physical activity of kids. And fitness peaked in about 1970. So it increased in the kids in 1970. And I just want to tell you that I was 15 in 1970. It's been downhill ever since until about the year 2005, and it's just beginning to turn up again now. So I think that's basically one generation we've seen. We've seen similar sorts of trends with childhood obesity. There's been no increase in the prevalence of overweight obesity in children in Australia, and really most countries around the world since about 2000. To increase over that same period.
You said that again because that's great news.
Yeah, there's been no increase in the prevalence of overweight obesity in Australia and in most developed countries around the world since about 2000. Over the last 15 years, it's been stable. It's just starting to fall off a little bit. So I think we are beginning to see that generational change. I guess the pessimistic view is that we've reached a saturation point. There could be any more obesity if we tried. But I think the positive side is we're starting to see this gradual turnaround. I think it comes through all these little nudges. Every time a mother packs a healthy lunch for their kid, every time they walk the kid to school, every time the school paints lines on their playgrounds, it turns around the ship.
Look, we've just got time for some final comments from Val. Did you want to add to that?
I just wanted to add that it is unequally distributed across our society. So while at a population level we see it, but we do need to think about those structural changes that we can make to actually help all communities be able to meet those levels.
Absolutely, absolutely. Can I have some closing comments from the panel to the group before we wrap up?
Well, one thing I've been doing for probably quite a few years now is standing ovations. And it's not because I want a standing ovation, but because that actually changes people from sitting to standing in a session like this where you sit for 2 hours. So if you can take something home with you and introduce it into an environment where you actually got a chance to influence things, think about standing ovations. So every time you clap, you stand up and then you sit down again. It's really simple. It actually doesn't disturb anything, but it makes a difference and it raises people's awareness that change is really easy to do.
That sounds very good.
I guess the thing about using a walking metaphor would be that, the longest journeys are small steps. And so you think about all the collective steps that we can take here in our sectors, in our industries, in our agencies. You don't have to take every step yourself. You just need to take your share of the steps. So it might be policy reform, it could be walking meetings. There's so many little things that we can do to create a tipping point. So I guess that's my message to you is to have a go.
There's a really nice anecdote about Bob Menzies, the Australian Prime Minister, was there for 23 years, and he was giving an address and somebody heckled him and said, "Come on, Bob, tell us everything you know, it won't take long." And Menzies said, "My good man, I'll do more than that. I'll tell you everything we both know, and it won't take any longer." I'll tell you everything I know. Everything I know is move more, sit less.
Fantastic. And I'll just simply say that as a child, under 10, the Activity campaign was introduced in my memory as a little kid. And as a small kid, I saw within 5 years significant change. And that is always what I come back to when I get worn out in trying to drive change. I remember the success of the Activity campaign, and I know it can be done. I want to thank you all for coming. I'd like to have a standing ovation for our panel. Thank you very much. Terrific conversation today. We'll be doing more of these. We want to see you again, and I thank you all for coming in. And it's been lovely working with SA Health, and thank you particularly for your help. Thanks again, everyone. Bye.